Welcome to the show. I'm Danella, and here's what's happening now. Sexual harassment running rampant in politics. I'll let you know what female lawmakers are saying, how much it's been costing you, and what they'd like to do about it. That's coming up in Political Pop. In our world, loaded on deck, here's what's coming up now. You know, last week I was telling you, cats are working on building spaceships to get off of this planet as the planet becomes sicker and sicker. I'm just trying to help your grandkids out, really your great-grandkids. That's what I'm trying to help. We'll talk about toxic algae runoff. It's running off from farms, and apparently over the last decade, it's been reported in every state. But first, we'll start off the show by talking about the Keystone Pipeline and the 210,000 gallon oil leak last night. It all happened underground. This is in South Dakota. They're still trying to figure out what caused the leak and how bad is it. It's underground. It did come a little bit above ground and affected some grass above ground. But the main question is it affecting the water source that's below the ground in that area? That's the big question. Also in our news, we're going to jump over to Puerto Rico and give you an update there. I don't know if you guys saw this. On Wednesday morning, the governor there, he told his Twitter followers that things are looking good. The Puerto Rican power utility had reached a short-term goal of getting output back on to 50%. Normal levels, right? And when he tweeted this out, he put hashtag PR se levanta, or Puerto Rico pulls itself up. Well, shortly after that tweet, the power grid crashed, unfortunately. And now, almost 2 months after Hurricane Maria, the island right now remains without power. This is most of the households in Puerto Rico still don't have power. And the other thing that the government's been doing, they're really trying to get the power grid up, but they've really been prioritizing healthcare facilities and other core infrastructure. So it's a huge problem there. And they're really hoping to rebuild the power grid soon, but this has been their biggest financial challenge. Now, before we get into Political Pop, I want to give you an update on Political Pop from earlier in the week. If you caught it earlier in the week or have checked the news, you may have heard about Trump's nominee. This is a 36-year-old Brett Talley, right? And he is up for a lifetime judgeship position, federal judge. This is what he's up for. To give you a little background about Talley, he made news because he's never tried a case. He's a lawyer who's never tried a case. In addition to not trying a case, he received a deemed not qualified by the American Bar Association. And this is to serve an appointment on the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Alabama. So that's what they said. But then Trump said, hey, let's get him on the federal level. Well, anyway, here's the update. The update is Talley is a ghost hunter. He is a ghost hunter who, when not hunting ghosts, writes a horror blog. I don't think people knew that, but that's what he does. In addition, he also failed to disclose a conflict of interest questionnaire, and that was that his wife is a lawyer for the White House. Well, anyway, Talley is likely to be confirmed by a full chamber pretty soon. Now, let's move on to Political Pop. Many of us were shocked to hear the allegations against Senator Al Franken of sexual assault. A female radio host came out and said back in 2006 that he forcibly kissed her and that he groped her while she was sleeping on a plane. This was in 2006. They were on a tour for the U.S. troops in the Middle East, and this picture is online. I know you've had to see it. If you haven't, he's there groping her. She's sleeping, and he's looking at the camera like this, like creepy looking at the camera. It's very distasteful. He's since apologized. He opened an ethics investigation. He said, I'll be open to participate. Well, we all agree. Well, on Wednesday, female lawmakers came out and said that sexual harassment is running rampant. They'd also said that it's happening with unnamed members of Congress right now. They announced this on Wednesday. They unveiled a new bill to target changing how sexual harassment complaints are reported and how they are resolved. Let me tell you how much you've been paying. over the last 20 years, taxpayers have paid out $15 million. Now keep in mind, this is inclusive of settlements, not only sexual harassment, but discrimination, other cases like that. That's another problem. It should be clear how much is sexual harassment, how much is discrimination, and other complaints. Totaling 260 settlements in all. And again, you know, taxpayers, we're paying for it. You would think that the money would come out of the state in which, you know, the person being accused works out of, but it doesn't. Nope, it comes out of taxpayers, our money. So if you feel that it doesn't affect you, if you feel that you're tired of hearing all these stories come about, think about how much you're actually paying for it, literally. And that was your political pop. Now, let's move on to In Our World. This week, we're talking about fertilizer runoff from farms creating sometimes toxic algae across the country. Now, remember, I'm just telling you what I learned. That's what I'm here for. And we talked about this last week. You see what people are doing, man. People that are affluent, I'll tell you what they're doing. Independently wealthy, they're working to build and pay for spaceships to leave Earth when the planet Earth is no longer inhabitable. I'm just trying to help your great-grandkids out so they can't say, how come nobody told me about this fertilizer runoff? Your grandkids can say, oh, my grandma did. My granddad did. All right, I'll make it short and sweet. Don't worry. You need to know this, and it's crazy, actually. I was shocked to hear this. So in theory, algae, right, is good for the food chain, right? So tiny plants and bacteria. Sometimes they multiply out of control. This is what scientists are now calling monster blooms. And that's what we have to really worry about, this monster blooms. And they're triggered when chemicals and manure that's intended to feed the crops, nourish the crops, when that runoff enters the water, and we're talking about nice, calm waters, well, the algae feed and feed, become more and more, and sometimes toxic. So the problem is, what can we do to stop the fertilizer that is polluting the waterways? And over the last decade, it's been reported in every state. I didn't know this, but it has. And here's what I didn't notice. This is really why I wanted to talk about it, because sometimes, I don't know, I just feel like we're focused on so many other things. So I want to give you a timeline for some recent reports. So last year, Florida's governor had to declare a state of emergency because of these algae blooms, and it forced the closure of some beaches there. This was last year. If you're in Florida, you're probably like, oh yeah, I totally know this. I paid attention. A lot of folks, I know we didn't notice this. Pets, livestock, also affected. In fact, they're being killed in July this year. 32 cattle, this is on an Oregon ranch, died after drinking algae-laced water. Tourism, recreation also being affected. This is in August. Guys, it's November. I'm telling you what happened in August. In August, an international water skiing festival in Milwaukee had to be canceled because of the water. In fact, scores of swimming pool areas have been closed nationwide. I had no idea of this. And so here's what the government has been doing about it. Government agencies have been spending billions of dollars on research. The other thing that they've been doing is also offering money to farmers. And so the idea is for farmers, if they make their farms more environmentally friendly. And some of the ideas that they have are farmers are asked to take steps such as planting what they're calling cover crops, and that's to reduce off-season erosion. Then another suggestion is installing more efficient irrigation systems. And so the idea is if you do this, taxpayers, we help pay for that. 75% of the farmers' costs come from taxpayers. So it's good to know where your taxpayer money is going. But here's the thing, only about 6% of the nation's roughly 2 million farms are enrolled in any program at any time. Only 6%. And what the farmers are saying is they're tired of government regulations. Okay, farmers. And what the environmentalists are saying and the people are saying is that we need to work together. You know, the farmers are also saying we're tired of the government regulating us, but hey, maybe farmers can work together on information sharing so that we can, you know, be more educated in what we're doing. How can we stop the runoff in a way that works for us, that doesn't cost us so much money? So it is a complicated issue. So here's the thing. How can you protect yourself? Obviously, you want to look out for algae blooming. That's the main thing. But then also, maybe you are a farmer. Maybe you're a friend of a farmer. Maybe you can talk to your local farmer and see what are they doing to try to reduce the amount of runoff from fertilizer that their farms are producing. And another thing, educate yourselves. I mean, I know you guys probably think I'm crazy. I probably sound crazy talking about spaceships and people investing money to do it. But to me, this is just another example of not really fixing a problem that can be fixable, because you can just put your grandchildren on a spaceship and get off of the planet if the oceans are no longer swimmable and if the water is no longer drinkable. I don't know. I'm just saying. I don't know. I hope that this isn't true. I hope that it isn't true. But at least you can't say ain't nobody tell you. That's all I'm saying. So before we wrap up the show, I was having this conversation with a good friend of mine the other week, and we were talking about, you know, our generation. Because when I think back to my grandmother's generation, I think about the serious generational gap. This is my maternal grandmother. And so her gap was her parents would kind of be like, what's this rock and roll? That's how they sound in my mind. I've never met them. But yeah, I imagine them saying to her, what's this rock and roll that you're listening to? What is that? And then for us, you know, my mom was never like, what's this hip hop, hippity hop? She wasn't like that. Shoot, my mom still go to the clubs. She does. And so I was talking to a friend of mine about this as well. He was saying, you know, our parents, our generation is, you know, our gaps are very different because older generations, there was a huge generational gap. But as time is evolving, that gap is smaller. And he joked about, hey, our parents still go to clubs. And it's so funny because last weekend, my mom was telling me about going to a cabaret. They're really big in this area. I have never been to a cabaret, and everybody's like, how do you not go? So cabaret locally, from what I understand, private parties, right? People can rent out an area, get a DJ, you have a cabaret, you can have food and dancing, but you never know what you're going to get. So she was really excited last week about going to a $3 cabaret. I'm just laughing because anyway, she went and was telling me how horrible it was. And I said, well, what do you expect? You paid $3 for this cabaret. And then that's why I end the conversation, because my mom, she, you know, I'm sure I mentioned it before. She had me as a teenager. She was a teenage mom. And so a lot of times she really wants to tell me about, you know, her kicking it. And this is just, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear this. My sister, they can really have these kind of conversations. They go into depth, like, you know, this is what happened. This is what was going down. I'm still in my decades on earth, like, call a friend. Just call a friend, tell a friend. I don't want to hear too much information about how it went down in the cabaret. So anyway, this led me to believe, how am I going to be as a mom, you know? Because my mom talks about, you know, when she goes to parties, how she hears rap music. And I say, well, Mom, if you think about it, the creators of rap are all getting older. So that's why you hear the music. And she's like, yeah, you're right. I guess you're right. Because she was young when it came out as well. And so for us, it'll be like that. You know, I wonder if I'll party with my son. Totally won't. I doubt it. Do you party with your kids? Can you leave that? If you have children, can you leave that in my comment section? If you're like me, your parents still goes to clubs, just let me know if that's true. I just think this is like kind of new territory, because generations, like my mom's generation, they weren't really kicking it with their kids at all. I know. But in theory, you know, I could go to a club with my mom. I'm not doing it. My sister does it. She's done it a lot. Anyway, yeah. So if you party out with your kids or with your parents, let me know. House parties, I'm down. Clubs, ugh. I just have this like feeling of being like, did she drop it? All right. Well, that about wraps up the show. Thank you so much for joining the show this week. As always, I hope you have an incredible weekend, and I will see you